My name is Jonathan Miller, and I never thought I would sit down at dinner with my own son, only to realize it was meant to be my last meal as a free man. One message flashing across my phone in the middle of that elegant table told me to get up, walk away, and not say a word. I listened, and it saved my life. What followed was a revelation so chilling that even now when I close my eyes, I can still see the betrayal written across my son's face. But the ending, when the truth burst through that mansion door, was something no father ever expects to witness. Before I begin, I want to know, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories like this one. The evening began with a sound I hadn't heard in over a year, my son's voice calling me Dad without bitterness. For months, silence had hung between us like a locked door ever since our last fight about money. So when Rick called and asked me to dinner, I felt the kind of cautious hope a wounded man feels when he dares to believe the bleeding might finally stop. He told me Emma was cooking pot roast, the same dish Margaret, my late wife, used to make. That detail tugged at me more than I wanted to admit. Maybe he had remembered something real about family. By 7 o'clock, I was standing in front of a mansion that didn't fit the boy I had raised. Stone columns, manicured hedges, and cars in the driveway, worth more than every vehicle I had ever owned combined. My modest shoes clicked against marble as the housekeeper ushered me inside. Everything was polished perfect, like a magazine spread, but instead of comfort, it filled me with unease. Rick greeted me in an expensive suit, hugging me longer than usual, while Emma floated in behind him with a rehearsed smile and perfume that hung too heavy in the air. "You look great, Dad," he said, his eyes darting a little too quickly, his grip a little too tight. I told myself I was imagining it. Families drift apart, then find their way back. Maybe this was that moment. The dining room shimmered with crystal and silver, the table set, as if for royalty. Rick poured me whiskey in a glass so heavy it felt like an anchor. We raised a toast, Emma's voice silky as she said, "To family, to forgiveness." I lifted the glass and tried to ignore the way my stomach twisted at her words. The whiskey burned going down, but it wasn't the smooth warmth I knew. My head grew strangely light, my thoughts less sharp, and a cold realization cut through the haze something wasn't right. They asked about my restaurants, about retirement, about legal documents. The questions came wrapped in casual laughter, but I could feel the net tightening. I forced a smile, steadying myself on memories of Margaret's wisdom. When something feels wrong, Jonathan, pay attention. Your instincts are God's gift of protection. I nodded, pretending to relax, but every nerve in my body screamed that I was being watched, weighed, and measured. I wanted to believe my son had called me here for reconciliation, but the truth was rising in my throat, like bitter smoke. Then, just as Rick refilled my glass and Emma leaned closer with a smile too wide, my phone buzzed under the linen tablecloth. I pulled it out discreetly, expecting some trivial restaurant matter. Instead, my heart froze at the message glowing on the screen. "Get up and go. Don't say anything to your son." My breath caught, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. Someone in that house knew the danger I was in and had risked everything to warn me. The words on my phone burned brighter than the chandelier overhead. "Get up and go. Don't say anything to your son." My first instinct was denial. Surely I was misreading it, or maybe it was a wrong number, but my hand trembled as I slid the phone back into my pocket, my heart beating against my ribs like a trapped bird. Rick leaned closer, concern etched on his face, but not the kind of concern a son shows his father. It was sharp, calculating, as if he wanted to measure every twitch, every blink. "You all right, Dad? You look a little pale." he asked, pouring more whiskey before I could answer. I forced a smile. Just rich food hitting me harder than I expected. Emma's laughter rang out smooth but brittle. "We can get you some water." "Maria." She called to the housekeeper, her voice too crisp, too rehearsed. The pot roast sat steaming on the table, smelling exactly like Margaret's recipe, but my appetite had vanished. Instead, I studied their faces. Rick's nervous energy, Emma's constant watching, suddenly it all made sense. This wasn't dinner. This was theater. And I was the target. My vision swam as the warmth of the whiskey spread too quickly, far stronger than it should have been. 2 glasses yet, I felt as though I'd downed half a bottle. Margaret's words whispered from memory. "Listen first, Jonathan. Ask questions later." I excused myself, forcing my legs steady as I rose from the table. "Bathroom," I muttered, keeping my tone casual. Rick nodded too quickly. "Second door on the left. We'll wait for you." His eagerness betrayed him. No son waits anxiously for his father to return from the restroom. The hallway stretched before me, lined with expensive paintings. But I walked past the bathroom, past the open door, to a powder room that glowed with gold fixtures. My steps carried me toward the kitchen instincts, pulling stronger than reason. There, Maria stood at the sink, washing glasses with deliberate calm. She didn't look up as I entered, didn't question why I was there, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands shook slightly when she set down a crystal tumbler. I realized then she knew. She was the one who had sent that message. Our eyes met briefly when I passed, and though her lips didn't move, her silence screamed louder than any words, "Go." The back door creaked softly as I pushed it open, the night air rushing in like salvation. Motion sensor lights flicked on, illuminating the manicured lawn and hedges trimmed with surgical precision. My polished shoes slipped slightly on the damp grass, but I kept moving, my pulse racing in my ears. Beyond the gate, a quiet street stretched out, lined with mansions just like Rick's, beautiful houses that hid ugly secrets. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, called for a ride 1 block away. The app promised 5 minutes. 5 minutes that felt like a lifetime. Standing under the glow of a street lamp, I looked back once at the house. My son's house. My family's betrayal. And I knew nothing about tonight was meant to reconcile. It was meant to erase me. The Uber's headlights pierced the suburban darkness, a lifeline cutting through my confusion. I slid into the back seat, my suit jacket suddenly too heavy, my breath shallow. The driver glanced at me through the mirror. "Evening, sir. Brooklyn right." I nodded, my voice refusing to come out. My hands gripped the phone like it was a weapon. And then it rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, my thumb hovering. The text had already saved me. Could I trust the voice behind it? I pressed accept. A calm, careful tone greeted me. "Mr. Miller, I'm glad you listened. You were in immediate danger tonight." I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" "What do you mean, danger?" That was my son. The silence stretched long enough to make my chest ache. "Then, your son owes $2.3 million to people who don't ask politely when payments are late." My head spun. "That's impossible. He lives in a mansion. He's in real estate." The voice remained steady, almost clinical. "Borrowed against everything. Gambling debts. Underground poker sports, betting loan sharks. He has 11 days left before they come to collect. Tonight, he needed your signature to cover it." The truth sank in like ice water. My mind replayed every detail of dinner, the 2 sweet smiles, the eager refills of whiskey, Emma's questions about retirement. "But why warn me?" I whispered. "Why risk it?" the voice lowered. "Because what they planned wasn't just cruel, It was criminal. The whiskey you drank was laced with zetrolum. It makes the alcohol 5 times stronger. You'd have been confused, compliant, easy to persuade to sign legal documents they prepared in advance. My blood froze. That explained the dizziness, the haze clouding my thoughts. So that's why I felt drunk after 2 glasses. Exactly. By morning, there would be no way to prove coercion. You'd look like a willing participant who handed over everything. And when you woke up, it would all be gone, your businesses, your savings, your independence. My hand went to my chest, pressing against the pounding of my heart. The betrayal was unbearable. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the young man Margaret and I had prayed for at night, had plotted to drug me into signing away my life's work. "How do you know all this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "That doesn't matter. What matters is you escaped before it was too late. But be careful. Rick is desperate. Desperate men don't give up after one failed plan." The driver's radio hummed faint jazz, a stark contrast to the storm raging in my head. I stared out the window at the immaculate lawns, the shining facades of Montclair, and wondered how many other perfect homes hid sins this deep. My phone buzzed again, 3 missed calls from Rick. The words from the voice still echoed, "They will try again." My hand shook as I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I wasn't just a father betrayed. I was now the only obstacle between my son and complete ruin. And Margaret's words came back to me clear as day, "Jonathan, when the storm comes, you stand your ground." The farther we drove from Montclair, the heavier the weight pressed on my chest. Brooklyn was calling me back to safety, to the comfort of my worn armchair and the photos of Margaret smiling from every corner. But safety felt hollow now. My son had crossed a line that no parent ever wants to believe their child is capable of crossing. I pulled out Margaret's picture from my wallet, her wedding day smile frozen in time. She wouldn't run from this, I thought. She'd face it head-on, no matter how painful. My phone buzzed again this time, another text from the same anonymous number. "Don't go home yet. They'll look for you there. Protect yourself first. Move your assets. Call the police." The instructions hit me like a bucket of cold water. This wasn't just about saving myself tonight. This was about ensuring they couldn't come after me again. I stared at the driver's reflection in the rearview mirror. Change of plans. "We're going back to Montclair." His eyes widened. "Sir, you sure you look pretty shaken up?" I leaned forward, my voice steadier than I felt. "Sometimes you have to choose between being safe and doing what's right." My fingers dialed 911 before fear could stop them. The dispatcher's calm voice answered, and I forced myself to explain every detail: the poisoned whiskey, the suspicious documents, my son's debts. My voice cracked once, but I steadied it with Margaret's memory. The operator promised officers were on the way. Estimated arrival 20 minutes. 20 minutes until truth and consequence collided under that mansion's crystal chandeliers. The driver hesitated when he saw me close the phone. "I don't want trouble," he said quietly. "Then just drop me near the corner. I'll walk the rest of the way." He gave me a long look in the mirror but didn't argue. The ride back felt different this time. The same immaculate streets now looked sinister shadows, stretching long across manicured lawns. Every porch light seemed to flicker with judgment. When we finally turned onto Hill Street, I saw 2 dark police cruisers sliding silently down the opposite lane, their lights off, but their presence unmistakable. My pulse jumped. This was really happening. As the Uber slowed, I tucked Margaret's photo back into my pocket, whispering to it like a prayer. "You always told me family means telling the truth, even when it breaks you." I stepped out onto the curved driveway, shoes crunching on gravel that sparkled in the street lamps. The mansion loomed above me, elegant and deceptive, a fortress of betrayal. I rang the bell. The chime echoed through the house, deep and haunting like a funeral toll. Footsteps approached quickly, too quickly for comfort. The door yanked open and Rick stood there, his expression a tug-of-war between relief and suspicion. "Dad, where have you been? You had us worried sick." His smile was too wide, his tone too sweet. I forced an apologetic look. Just needed some air. Felt dizzy. Emma appeared behind him, her perfect mask of composure cracking at the edges. She reached for my arm with trembling hands. "Jonathan, you scared us. Please come inside." I stepped back into their gilded world, carrying with me not fear, but something far sharper, resolve. Tonight would not end the way they had planned. The dining room looked different when I stepped back inside. Earlier, it had dazzled me with its polished mahogany and glittering crystal. Now it felt like a stage set, the kind you'd find in a play about betrayal. The silverware was neatly stacked, plates cleared, but I knew what had sat here minutes earlier, papers waiting for my unsteady signature. Emma guided me back to the head of the table, her touch lingering on my shoulder too long. Her smile stretched thin. Rick circled the table like a restless predator. "Feeling better, Dad?" he asked, drumming his fingers against the wood. I nodded. Fresh air always does the trick. I kept my voice calm, though my pulse beat like a war drum. They thought I was still in their hands, still pliable under the whiskey haze. But the fog had lifted, replaced by clarity sharper than any blade. Rick moved to the liquor cabinet. "Let's have one more toast. End the evening properly." His hands shook as he poured. My eyes locked on the glass he placed before me. The amber liquid swirled differently than his own. Sediment danced under the chandelier's light, faint but undeniable. I thought of the warning voice Zetrolum mixed in alcohol erases resistance and memory. Rick set the glass down carefully. "For new beginnings," he said, forcing a smile. Emma leaned forward, her eyes fixed on me, urging me to drink. I lifted the glass, swirling it gently, letting the seconds stretch like rope tightening around their throats. "You know," I said softly, "your mother always believed patience makes everything taste better." Rick froze, the faint twitch in his jaw betraying him. Emma's grip on my arm tightened. "Jonathan, why don't we toast first? Then you can tell us your stories." I smiled faintly, still holding the glass just shy of my lips. The day Rick was born, Margaret was in labor for 14 hours. She swore something was wrong, but the doctor kept saying everything was normal. She was stubborn. She was right. Rick's voice cracked frustration, bleeding through his forced charm. "Dad, please just drink. We don't want the whiskey to lose its flavor." I turned the glass, letting the particles shimmer like guilty secrets. "The thing about stubbornness," I continued evenly, "is that it can save a man's life." The room fell silent tension, thick as smoke. Then 3 sharp knocks echoed through the foyer. Firm, authoritative, unmistakable. Police. Rick's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor, whiskey spilling like blood across the tile. Emma's perfect smile collapsed into panic. "What's going on?" she hissed, but I already knew. The cavalry had arrived. Heavy footsteps pounded in the entryway, voices booming with command. Police opened the door. Rick's face went pale, the mask stripped away. Emma's nails dug into my sleeve. "Jonathan, say something. Tell them this is a mistake." I set my untouched glass on the table, pushing it toward the light where the strange sediment sparkled for all to see. "No mistake," I said calmly. "This ends tonight." The sound of police boots against marble will stay with me forever. They moved with practiced authority, voices clipped and direct, as if they'd walked into scenes like this countless times. But this time it was my house, my son's house, and my family on the receiving end. Rick froze his eyes, darting from the shattered whiskey glass on the floor to the stern faces of the officers flooding the dining room. Emma's painted composure broke instantly. Her hand flew to her chest, her lips trembling. One officer stepped forward, his badge gleaming under the chandelier. "Richard Miller, you're under arrest for attempted poisoning conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse." The words cracked through the air like thunder. Rick's knees nearly gave out, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Then he found his voice raw and boyish, nothing like the slick man in the designer suit. "No, this is insane. My father, he's confused. Dad, tell them you're fine." His pleading eyes locked on me, the same eyes that once begged me to read one more bedtime story, to buy him one more baseball glove. For a fleeting second, my chest tightened with the memory. But then I looked at the glass, the poisoned amber swirling under the light, and the tenderness burned away. "There's no mistake," I said firmly. My words silenced the room. That drink was meant to strip me of everything Margaret and I built. My own son put it in my hand. Emma broke in, her voice high-pitched and trembling. "That's not true, Rick, never. He was desperate. We were just trying to help him. I didn't want any of this." The officer's pen scratched notes on a pad, his expression flat. He'd heard excuses before, and hers sounded no different. Another officer slipped on latex gloves, carefully lifting my untouched glass from the table. "Sediments visible," he said, holding it under the chandelier. "We'll run tests, but this looks exactly like what was reported." Rick's face turned gray, panic spreading like cracks in old plaster. He lunged forward only to be caught by two officers who pinned his arms behind his back. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice breaking. "I had no choice. Loan sharks, 2.3 million. If I don't pay, they'll kill me." The words hung in the air, heavy with desperation and truth. Emma gasped, covering her mouth, but her eyes betrayed knowledge she'd hoped would never surface. The officers didn't flinch. One simply said, "You'll have plenty of time to explain downtown." The metallic click of handcuffs snapped shut around Rick's wrists. I felt the sound in my bones, sharp and final. My son's life, the boy I had raised, the man I had prayed would find his way, was unraveling before me. And he had done it with his own hands. Emma sobbed, collapsing into a chair, but even in her grief I could see calculation. She was already shaping her defense, rehearsing her role as victim. The officers turned to me. "Mr. Miller, we'll need your statement as soon as possible. But for now, you're safe." Safe. The word tasted strange. I wasn't sure safety existed anymore. Not when it had been destroyed inside my own bloodline. Emma's sobs filled the dining room, but I knew crocodile tears when I saw them. She clutched the edge of the table, her silk dress crumpled, her mascara streaking like war paint. "I didn't plan this," she cried. "It was all Rick. He forced me. I was terrified." Her voice cracked at just the right moments, but the officers remained unmoved. They had seen too many desperate liars to be swayed by trembling lips and rehearsed hysteria. One officer read her rights, his tone steady as iron. She flinched when the cuffs clicked shut, the illusion of control slipping away. Rick turned on her immediately, fury blazing in his eyes. "Don't you dare put this on me, Emma. You were in it just as deep. You researched the drug, you cooked, the food, you played, the doting wife." His words spilled like venom, betraying every fragile alliance they had built. Emma's sobs stopped abruptly. She straightened, her eyes narrowing into slits. "I did it because you said they'd kill us both if we didn't deliver. You were the one who dragged us into the casinos, into the betting. You ruined everything." The officers tightened their grip as the couple's blame game escalated, each accusation another nail in the coffin of their partnership. I sat back, watching the unraveling with a strange detachment. The people before me weren't the family I had once hoped to reconcile with. They were strangers who had worn masks of love, and now those masks were lying shattered on the marble floor. One officer turned to me. "Mr. Miller, do you have any idea how they got your private financial details? They seem to know everything, your routines, your business structure." I felt the ache in my chest as I nodded. My son grew up in those restaurants. He knows the accounts, the schedules, the way I handle paperwork. He didn't need to steal it, he lived it. And Emma, she studied my habits like a hawk. The words left a bitter taste in my mouth. Betrayal didn't come from outsiders. It came from those who knew you best. As they led Rick and Emma toward the front door, Rick twisted in the officer's hold. His face was pale, but his voice rose frantic and pleading. "Dad, you can't let them do this. Think of Mom. She'd never want me locked up like this." The name of Margaret hit me like a blow. For a moment I saw her face gentle and forgiving. But then I remembered the years we spent building everything from nothing, the way she cherished honesty above all else. "Your mother valued truth," I said quietly, my voice carrying in the silence. "And truth is what condemns you tonight." Rick stumbled, his shoulders sagging as though those words cut deeper than the steel around his wrists. The officers guided them out, Emma shouting, Rick muttering incoherent pleas. Their voices faded into the night, swallowed by the hum of engines and the glow of red and blue lights outside. The house fell quiet, except for the sound of Maria softly clearing the table, her movements careful, almost reverent. She glanced at me, her eyes full of something I hadn't seen all night, human decency. And in that moment, I realized she had been the only true ally in that house of betrayal. The police cars pulled away, their sirens silent, but their flashing lights painting the manicured hedges in red and blue. I stood alone in that grand foyer, the air heavy with the stench of spilled whiskey and broken trust. For the first time all evening, I let myself sit, lowering into one of the dining chairs that had once been my throne at this farce of a reunion. My hands trembled as I pressed my palms flat against the polished wood. Safe, the officer had said. But was I really? I had just watched my only son hauled away in handcuffs, shouting my wife's name as though invoking her memory could erase the crimes he had committed. Emma's voice still echoed in my ears, shrill and desperate, trying to play the victim. And the worst part, the very worst part, was the small, aching truth a piece of me still wanted to believe him. Still wanted to believe my boy hadn't meant it, that he had been pushed into this corner by debts and desperation. But the evidence was undeniable. I looked toward the untouched glass of whiskey still sitting on the table like a relic. The strange particles drifted lazily at the bottom, proof of a plan so cold it made my stomach turn. Margaret used to say, "You can forgive mistakes, Jonathan, but you can't excuse intent." Rick's intent had been clear. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the silence. 3 missed calls, all from Rick's number. I stared at the screen until it dimmed my reflection, staring back at me, older, wearier, but resolute. If I answered, I knew exactly what I would hear. Pleading, promises. The same cycle he had spun years ago when he'd come begging for money. But this wasn't a broken car or a bad business deal. This was attempted patricide. "Don't answer it." Maria's quiet voice came from the doorway. I turned surprised to see her standing there, her hands folded neatly in front of her apron. "They'll twist your heart if you let them." Her words were simple, but they hit harder than any lecture. She had watched everything tonight, seen the lies, the rehearsed charm, the poison in the glass. Yet her eyes held no judgment, only a deep sadness. "You knew," I said softly. She nodded. 3 days ago, I overheard them. They thought I didn't understand English or that I didn't matter if I did. They spoke openly about the drug, about the papers. I couldn't just stand by and watch. Her voice broke, and for the first time that night, I felt tears sting my eyes. A stranger had risked her job, maybe her life, to save me, while my own son had plotted my destruction. "Thank you, Maria," I whispered. She shook her head. "No thanks needed. A man who says please and thank you, who looks at me like I matter, that's rare in this house. You deserved better." I looked around at the marble, the chandeliers, the illusions of success. "Better doesn't live here," I said firmly. "But maybe it still lives in Brooklyn." As I stood, the weight of my decision settled over me. My son had chosen greed. My daughter-in-law had chosen complicity. But I still had the power to choose integrity. And tonight, that choice had saved my life. The Montclair police station buzzed with late-night activity when we arrived. Officers shuffled paperwork, radios crackled with reports, and the faint scent of burnt coffee hung in the air. They guided me to a small room with fluorescent lights that hummed like restless insects. A detective introduced himself as Harrison, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too much of humanity's darker side. He slid a notepad across the table. "Mr. Miller, I'll need you to walk me through everything from the beginning. Don't leave out a detail." I drew a breath, steadying myself. The words came slowly at first, then poured out like water breaking through a dam: the invitation to dinner, the mansion, the pot roast, the whiskey that burned too quickly. I told him about the text message, about slipping out the back door, about the voice on the phone explaining Zetrolum and debts. When I reached the moment I decided to return with the police, my throat tightened. Harrison scribbled notes, his face unreadable. "So this anonymous caller," he said, tapping his pen. "You're certain they knew specific details about the drug and the plan?" I nodded. "They knew everything. The dosage, the documents, even the timeline." His brow furrowed. "That kind of knowledge doesn't come from strangers." "Do you suspect anyone in the household?" My mind flicked instantly to Maria, her trembling hands, her silent warning in the kitchen. But I hesitated. Revealing her identity could cost her dearly. "No idea," I said at last. "Whoever it was saved my life." Harrison studied me for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. "Well, whoever it was may have given you the only chance you had. We'll run tests on the glass, compare it against known compounds. But Mr. Miller," he paused, his voice lowering, "this isn't just about poisoning. We found prepared documents in Rick's office. Power of attorney, complete business transfers, all with your name waiting for a signature." My stomach lurched. Even hearing it aloud made the betrayal heavier. "How long would they serve?" I asked quietly. Harrison folded his hands. "Attempted poisoning alone carries 8 to 12 years. Conspiracy, elder abuse, fraud, you're looking at 15 to 20. Emma may get less if she cooperates, but Rick..." He shook his head. Rick's staring down the barrel of a long sentence. Through the window of the small room, I could see the holding cells. Rick sat hunched on a bench, his face pale, his suit wrinkled like discarded paper. Every few seconds he glanced toward the window, as if he knew I was watching. His lips moved, pleading words I couldn't hear but had heard too many times before. Promises to change, to repay, to be better. The same hollow phrases he'd fed me over the years. My chest tightened, torn between paternal instinct and bitter truth. Harrison followed my gaze. "Mr. Miller," he said gently, "men in your position often blame themselves. Don't. Adult children make their own choices. You didn't put that poison in your glass, he did." I nodded slowly, though the guilt still clawed at me. Somewhere deep down, I had always believed I could save Rick from himself. Tonight proved me wrong. By the time the paperwork was finished, the station clock showed nearly midnight. My statement had been typed, reviewed, and signed, yet my heart was still pounding, as if it had just begun. I stepped into the lobby, the harsh fluorescent lights replaced by dim lamps that threw long shadows across tiled floors. From the holding cells down the corridor, voices echoed Rick's low, desperate muttering, Emma's high-pitched sobs. The sounds wove together into a symphony of ruin. I approached the glass wall separating me from them. Rick noticed first. His head snapped up, his face pressed against the reinforced barrier. "Dad," his voice carried the same urgency he had once used when he was 10 years old, crying after falling off his bike. "Please, you have to help me. I'll fix this. I'll go to treatment. I'll change. Just don't let them take my life away." For a moment, my knees weakened. I saw flashes of him as a child. Margaret's arm wrapped around him, his proud grin at graduation. But then reality cut through like a blade. He hadn't fallen off a bike. He had tried to poison his own father. I met his eyes steadily, though my chest ached. "You had choices, Rick. You chose this path." His face twisted, half fury, half despair. "They'll kill me if I don't pay them back. You don't understand." I pressed my hand against the glass. "No, son. You don't understand. Debt is a burden, but betrayal that destroys everything." His shoulders slumped as the weight of those words sank in. From the women's holding area, Emma's voice rose sharp and frantic. "Jonathan, please tell them I was forced. Tell them I didn't want this. I was scared for my life." Her hands clutched the bars, her jewelry glinting absurdly in the institutional light. I shook my head slowly. "You researched my habits, my favorite meals, the drug. You weren't forced, you participated." Her eyes widened, then narrowed into something cold. Even in chains, she was calculating her next move. Detective Harrison appeared at my side, coffee in hand. "They'll be processed for arraignment in the morning," he said. "Your testimony will be crucial." I nodded, my throat dry. As he walked me toward the exit, my phone buzzed again. A number I now recognized. I answered quietly, stepping into the cool night air. "Mr. Miller," the familiar voice said, warmer now, less disguised. "How are you?" Relief flooded me. "Maria," I whispered. "It was you. You saved me." There was a pause, and then her voice trembled. "I couldn't let them hurt you. I've seen too much cruelty in this house, and you were the only one who treated me like I mattered." My eyes stung, the first tears since Margaret's funeral welling in the corners. "You risked everything for me," I said. "That deserves more than thanks." Silence stretched heavy with emotion. "I own 7 restaurants in Brooklyn," I continued, my voice steadying. "I need a manager I can trust. Someone with integrity. Someone like you." Maria gasped softly. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll start Monday at 10, I told her. For the first time that night, I felt something close to peace. Amid the wreckage of betrayal, I had found one person who still understood the meaning of loyalty. The ride back to Brooklyn was quiet, but my thoughts were anything but. Streetlights flashed past the car window, each one pulling me further from the marble floors of Montclair and closer to the modest home Margaret and I had built together. Yet even as the skyline came into view, I felt no comfort. Betrayal travels with you, it sits in your chest, heavy, refusing to be left behind. When the driver finally pulled up to my house, I stepped out slowly, gripping the railing for balance. My body was weary, but my mind was wide awake. The police had Rick and Emma, yes, but their story was far from over. Desperation doesn't vanish in a cell. Loan sharks don't forget. And a son who could betray his father once could very well try again. Inside the house greeted me with silence, the kind that wraps around your bones. I set my coat on the same hook Margaret had always used, her scarf still hanging beside it, like she had just stepped out for groceries. On the refrigerator, photos stared back at me: Rick, at 12, holding his first baseball glove. Emma smiling beside him at their wedding. And in the center, Margaret with that expression that had guided me through life, calm, steady, certain. I touched her picture, my fingers lingering. "What would you have me do now?" I whispered into the kitchen. The answer didn't come, but the truth of it already weighed on me. If Rick owed that kind of money to dangerous men, this ordeal wasn't finished. The police had caught the attempted poisoning, but they hadn't caught the storm looming on the horizon. I needed to act before those debts dragged me back into danger. My phone buzzed on the counter, its vibration cutting through the silence. A text from Detective Harrison: assets should be secured immediately. Rick knows too much about your business. Transfer accounts change, locks notify your lawyer. Beneath it, a second message. Be prepared. Loan sharks don't play by courtroom rules. I rubbed my temple. My restaurants weren't just businesses, they were Margaret's legacy, the dream we'd built together. The thought of them falling into Rick's reckless hands was unbearable. I dialed my attorney, Ellis, even though the hour was late. To my surprise, she answered, her voice calm but alert. "Jonathan, I've been briefed. We need to act quickly. I'll meet you at the office in the morning. For tonight, stay locked in and keep your phone close." Her certainty steadied me. Hanging up, I felt a spark of resolve kindle inside. I wasn't helpless, not yet. My son had tried to rob me of my dignity, my independence, my life's work, but he hadn't succeeded. And he wouldn't. I poured myself a glass of water, the ordinary clink of ice, a reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of fighting back. As I drank, my eyes caught the faint glow of the calendar pinned to the wall. Monday, 10 a.m. Maria's first day. For the first time in hours, I felt something new stirring inside me: hope. Maybe betrayal had destroyed my faith in family, but loyalty, true loyalty, had found me in an unexpected place. Morning light crept through the blinds, painting long stripes across the living room floor. I hadn't slept. My mind replayed the night in loops: Rick's pleading eyes, Emma's shrill denials, the glint of poison at the bottom of a crystal glass. Every detail sat sharp as glass shards under my skin. But as the sun rose, so did my determination. I brewed coffee the way Margaret used to, strong and steady, filling the house with a comfort that almost disguised the ache in my chest. My phone buzzed with updates: the police had transferred Rick and Emma to county jail. Formal charges were being prepared: attempted poisoning, conspiracy, elder abuse, fraud. Words that sounded like headlines, not family history. Yet there it was, in black and white. Before the weight could crush me, I forced myself into motion. Ellis, my lawyer, was waiting at her office downtown. By the time I arrived, she had already laid out folders across her polished oak desk. "Jonathan," she said, motioning me to sit, "we have work to do. Your son's access to your finances is deeper than you realize. He knows your schedules, your account patterns, even your manager rotations. We have to move everything now." She spoke like a surgeon about to cut out a tumor, calm, efficient, unflinching. For the next hour, we transferred funds into secure accounts, locked down property deeds, and drafted legal blocks preventing Rick from accessing a single asset. My restaurants, my savings, even the modest house Margaret and I had called home, they were shielded, at least for now. Ellis leaned back at last, her eyes softening. "I know this isn't easy, but Jonathan, you've taken the first step. You've protected Margaret's legacy. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Margaret's legacy. That's what this was about, more than money, more than betrayal. It was about honoring the life we had built together and refusing to let it be poisoned by greed. Leaving Elise's office, I stepped into the bustle of Brooklyn streets. The air was crisp, the chatter of morning commuters sharp in my ears. For the first time since last night, I felt grounded, connected to a city that thrived on resilience. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, no message, just silence on the other end when I answered. I knew better than to dismiss it. Loan sharks. Rick's debts weren't going to vanish because he was behind bars. If anything, they'd grow more dangerous, more desperate. That realization chilled me more than the morning air. As I walked back toward my car, my thoughts turned to Maria. She had risked everything to save me. Now, in a way, she was part of my future. Monday at 10, she would walk into my newest restaurant as a manager, no longer a servant in someone else's gilded cage. And maybe, just maybe, that was the silver lining. Betrayal had shattered the family I thought I had, but in its ruins, a new kind of loyalty was rising. Loyalty chosen, not inherited. I tightened my grip on Margaret's photo in my wallet. Whatever storm was coming, I would face it. For her, for the life we built, and for the truth that still mattered. That night, after meeting Alice and locking down everything I could, I returned home to a silence that felt different, thicker, heavier, as if the walls themselves knew betrayal had crossed their threshold. I sat in my old armchair, Margaret's photo in hand, and let exhaustion drag me into a restless sleep. When the phone rang near midnight, the sound sliced through my dream like a blade. My heart jumped, thinking it was the police with an update, but the caller ID froze my blood. Rick. I stared at the glowing screen, every instinct screaming to let it go to voicemail. But my hand betrayed me, and I answered. Dad, his voice came ragged, desperate, stripped of all bravado. Please, you have to help me. They'll kill me in here. You don't understand. These men, they don't wait for courts or police. They'll come after me and after you. My chest tightened. Rick, you tried to poison me, I said quietly. You put your own father's life on the line to save yourself. Why should I believe you now? His words tumbled out in a rush. Because I'm your son. You think I wanted this. I made mistakes, sure, but those men, they own me now. You're the only one who can stop this. Pay them off, Dad, just once more. Please, I swear I'll change. It was the same song I had heard 100 times in smaller keys, after lost jobs, after failed ventures, after debts he swore he'd never repeat. But this time the stakes were higher. This time he'd tried to kill me. My hand trembled around the receiver, torn between instinct and memory. I saw him at 5 years old, his hand in mine as we crossed a busy street. At 15, grinning with his first driver's license. At 25, Margaret's proud tears at his wedding. And now 37, begging from behind bars after attempting patricide. You had a choice, Rick, I whispered. And you made it. His voice cracked. So you're just going to let them kill me, your only son? I swallowed hard. No, son. I'm going to let the truth have its way. You dug this hole. You'll have to climb out yourself. His scream was raw animal before the line went dead. I set the phone down with shaking hands. My chest ached as if my heart itself had been torn. That's when another sound startled me, a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find Maria, her face lined with worry. I didn't know where else to go, she said softly. After they arrested Rick and Emma, I knew their debts wouldn't just disappear. You're in danger, Mr. Miller. Her warning confirmed what Rick had said. The loan sharks were real. The threat wasn't confined to jail walls. I stepped aside, letting her in. For the first time, I realized something profound. I was no longer fighting just for myself. I was fighting for the legacy Margaret and I had built, and for the people who still believed in decency like Maria. Betrayal had taken my son from me, but loyalty had given me someone worth protecting. Maria sat at my kitchen table, her hands folded tightly, eyes darting as if she expected shadows to move. I brewed us both tea, though my own hands trembled so much I nearly spilled the kettle. "Tell me everything," I said, sliding a cup toward her. She hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "They owe money to very dangerous people. I overheard Emma one night. She said if Rick didn't pay by the deadline, they'd come after you too because you were his only lifeline. They planned to make you sign everything over, then vanish." I gripped my mug, the steam fogging my glasses. "And you knew all this time," her eyes filled with guilt. I didn't know what to do. I'm just the help invisible most days. But then I heard them say your name and I couldn't stay silent. That's when I sent the message. I studied her face, the mixture of fear and courage, and I knew she was telling the truth. She had risked her job, maybe her safety, to warn me. Something my own son hadn't hesitated to throw away. "Maria," I said slowly, "I owe you my life." She shook her head. "No, you don't owe me anything. I just couldn't watch good be destroyed by greed." We sat in silence for a moment, the clock ticking loud in the quiet house. My phone buzzed again, this time from Detective Harrison. "Be cautious. Word on the street is Rick's debt holders are looking for you. Stay locked in tonight. We'll assign a patrol car." My stomach sank. The storm Rick had unleashed wasn't done with me. "Maria," I said carefully, "you can't go back to that mansion. Not now. You'll be safer if you stay here until things settle." She blinked, surprised. "I don't want to intrude." "You saved me," I replied firmly. "That makes you family now." Her lips trembled at that word, and she lowered her gaze, perhaps not used to hearing it directed toward her. Later that night, after Maria had gone to the guest room, I sat alone in the living room with Margaret's picture in my hands. I thought about the kind of woman she had been: brave, compassionate, unwilling to turn her back on what was right. Maria had shown those same qualities tonight. Meanwhile, my son, my own flesh and blood, had traded those values for greed and lies. The contrast tore at me. Around 2 a.m, I heard the low hum of an engine outside. Peering through the curtain, I saw a dark sedan idling across the street. Its headlights were off, but I felt its presence like a predator waiting in the grass. The patrol car Harrison had promised hadn't arrived yet. My pulse hammered. Were they watching me already? I tightened my robe around me, whispering to Margaret's photo. "You'd tell me not to hide. You'd tell me to fight." For the first time in years, I realized the truth. My battle wasn't just with Rick. It was with the darkness he had invited into both our lives. And if I wanted to protect what Margaret and I had built, I had to be ready to fight harder than ever. The dark sedan remained outside my house for nearly an hour, its silhouette a shadow stitched into the street. I sat by the window with the lights off, Margaret's old baseball bat resting across my knees, waiting for a move that never came. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust rattling the glass, set my nerves on edge. Finally, red and blue lights appeared down the block. A patrol car slowed in front of the sedan, its spotlight sweeping across the windshield. The mysterious car roared to life and vanished into the night like a ghost retreating from dawn. Relief washed through me, but only briefly. The threat was real. Rick's mistakes had spilled into my life, and there was no wall thick enough to keep them out forever. When morning came, I called Detective Harrison. They were here, I told him, my voice hoarse from a sleepless night. Sitting outside, watching. He sighed. "We figured they'd make a move. They'll try to scare you first. But Jonathan scaring you is just the start." His words sank like stones. "So what do I do?" He paused. You already did the hardest part. You spoke up. Now you secure yourself, trust the law, and don't give them an inch. They can't take what you don't hand over. After the call, I found Maria in the kitchen making coffee as if she'd lived here for years. She looked up, concern softening her features. Was it them? I nodded. Yes, but they're gone for now. She poured me a cup, her hands steady. My father used to say, danger only wins when you stop living your life. Don't let them stop you, Mr. Miller. Her words settled something in me. For too long, I had let fear and guilt run the show. Fear of losing my son, guilt for not saving him from himself. But Maria was right. I couldn't stop living. I had a business to protect people depending on me, a legacy Margaret had entrusted to me. That afternoon, I walked into my newest restaurant with Maria by my side. Staff paused, curious about the unfamiliar woman. I introduced her with pride. This is Maria Gonzalez. She's the new manager here. She saved me when no one else would, and she'll lead this place with integrity. The team welcomed her warmly, and I saw something change in her posture, shoulders, back, chin lifted, as if she was finally stepping into the life she deserved. Watching her, I realized something profound. Betrayal had taken my son, but loyalty had given me someone new to believe in. As the day wound down, I locked the office door and sat at Margaret's old desk, her photo propped up beside the computer. We're not done yet, I whispered to her, smile. Rick's debts are still out there circling like wolves, but I won't hide. I won't hand them what we built. Outside, the city hummed with its usual noise, indifferent to my private war. But inside, resolve burned steady. They could come knocking again, and when they did, they'd find a man who refused to be broken. By the time the trial date was set, weeks had passed, but the weight of betrayal never loosened its grip. Every morning, I woke to the same routine coffee news headlines, and the ache of remembering my son sat behind bars for trying to poison me. Yet even as the courts prepared their case, the shadow of Rick's debts hung overhead. Detective Harrison reminded me often, "Loan sharks don't care about courtroom schedules, Mr. Miller. They want their money." I believed him. The sedan outside my house had proved as much. Still, life pressed forward. Maria had stepped into her new role with remarkable steadiness. On her first official Monday, she arrived in a pressed blouse and a notebook full of ideas. She walked the restaurant floor with an attentiveness I hadn't seen in years, treating every waiter and cook with dignity. Watching her command respect, I felt pride stir where shame had lived for too long. At least one choice I'd made had turned out right. But betrayal doesn't sit quietly in the background. It came roaring back one crisp afternoon as I locked up the Crown Heights location. My phone rang, an unknown number again. I almost let it go, but something in me braced and I answered. A gravelly voice snarled into the line. "Jonathan Miller, you're going to pay your son's debt. 2.3 million. 11 days left became 9. We don't negotiate." My stomach tightened. "I'm not responsible for Rick's mistakes," I said, my tone sharper than I felt. A chilling chuckle followed. "Blood pays blood. You think prison walls protect him, or you? We know where you live, where you work, even who you just promoted." My grip on the phone turned white-knuckled. They knew about Maria. "Stay away from her," I growled before I could stop myself. Silence, then another low laugh. "Then pay, or watch loyalty cost her life." The line went dead. For a long moment I stood frozen, the city noise around me blurring into nothing. They weren't bluffing. They had eyes everywhere, and they had just drawn Maria into the crosshairs. Driving home that night, I couldn't shake the thought Rick hadn't just endangered himself. His greed had endangered anyone who stood near me. I found Maria waiting in my living room, sorting through some paperwork I'd given her. She looked up, concern flickering immediately. What happened? You're pale. I sank into the armchair, my voice low. They called me. They know about you. They threatened your life. Her face drained of color, but she didn't flinch. Then I'll stay and fight, she said simply. I didn't save you just to run away. For a moment I saw Margaret in her, the same quiet resolve, the same courage. But the thought of losing another person I cared about was unbearable. Maria, I said, my throat tight. If you stay, this gets dangerous. Deadly. She met my gaze, unflinching. So be it. But if we don't stand up to them now, they'll never stop. Her words echoed in the silence, heavy but true. And in that moment, I knew this fight wasn't just mine anymore. The next morning, I sat across from Detective Harrison in his cramped office at the precinct. Papers were stacked high, the air heavy with stale coffee, but his focus was razor sharp. I laid it out plainly, the late-night call, the threats against Maria, the $2.3 million that had tied every knot of this web. Harrison's jaw tightened as he scribbled notes. We expected this, he admitted. Loan sharks don't care about due process, but the fact they threatened her means they're getting desperate. He leaned forward, voice dropping. The key is evidence, Mr. Miller. We catch them making threats, we tie it to Rick's conspiracy, and we bury them legally. You ready to take that risk? I swallowed. It wasn't just my life on the line anymore. Maria's safety, my restaurants, even Margaret's legacy, all of it hung in the balance. I'm ready, I said. But I won't let Maria become a casualty. Harrison nodded once, then slid a small device across the desk. Recorder. Keep it on you at all times. If they call again, we'll have their voice on file. Leaving the station, I felt a strange mix of dread and resolve. My father had taught me long ago that when men backed you into a corner, you had two choices: fold or fight. Margaret would have chosen to fight, and now so would I. Back at the restaurant, Maria was walking the floor with the quiet authority that came so naturally to her. When I told her about the plan, she listened without flinching. If they call me, I'll record it too, she said, her tone steady. You gave me a chance, Mr. Miller. I won't let fear steal it. That night, the phone rang again. Same gravel voice dripping with menace. Clock's ticking. 8 days now. We'll collect one way or another. My hand shook, but I forced calm into my voice. If you want money, show your face. Otherwise, this is nothing but air. The line crackled. Careful, old man. We'll bleed you dry before you even see us coming. Click. Silence. I exhaled slowly, then glanced at the recorder's blinking red light. Evidence. Not enough to shut them down yet, but a start. Later, Maria joined me at my kitchen table. The weight of everything pressed between us, yet her eyes held steady. You know, she said softly, when I first took that job in Montclair, I thought I was walking into opportunity. But that house, it was nothing but poison dressed in marble. I nodded. And now you're in a fight you didn't choose. She shook her head firmly. No, Mr. Miller, I did choose. I chose to send that message. I chose to stand with you. And I'll keep choosing it. For a long time we sat in silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant noise of the city outside. And in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, the strength of standing shoulder to shoulder with someone who truly understood loyalty. But even as that comfort settled, I knew the war wasn't over. The sharks were circling closer, and the final blow was yet to come. The threats didn't stop. If anything, they grew bolder. 2 nights after that call, I came home to find my mailbox pried open, its contents scattered across the lawn. A single playing card, a joker, lay on the porch, weighted down by a bullet casing. A message as clear as fire on dry grass. Maria found me standing there, staring at it. Her face paled, but she didn't back away. "They're trying to scare you," she said. I bent down, picked up the casing, and turned it over in my hand. "They're trying to remind me time's running out. That night I couldn't sit still. I walked the house like a restless guard, checking locks twice, 3 times. Margaret's photo on the mantel seemed to watch me, urging me to be stronger than fear. At dawn, I called Harrison. He came within the hour, his unmarked car blending into the sleepy Brooklyn street. When I showed him the card, encasing, his jaw tightened. "Classic intimidation," he muttered. "They want you rattled enough to give in. Don't. We'll log it as evidence." His certainty steadied me, but only for a moment. What if evidence isn't enough? What if they get to Maria? Harrison's gaze was sharp. Then we get ahead of them. We don't wait for them to strike. We draw them out. It was a dangerous plan, but the longer we waited, the more control they held. That evening, Maria sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I explained what Harrison proposed, baiting them, recording everything, handing them enough rope to hang themselves in court. She listened quietly, then lifted her eyes. "If that's what it takes, I'll do it." "Maria," I said firmly, "I won't let you risk your life for my fight." Her expression softened. "But it's not just your fight anymore, is it? They threatened me too. And if we don't stop them, they'll keep circling, waiting for weakness." Her words were a mirror of Margaret's spirit, brave, unyielding. That night, we staged the first step. Harrison wired my phone, instructing me to keep calm if they called again, to lead the conversation toward money terms meetings. "Get them to put details on tape," he said. "Every word helps." Just past midnight, the phone rang. The same gravel voice snarled into my ear. 7 days. Tick-tock. My throat tightened, but I forced my tone to remain steady. "If you want money, I need to know where and when. No more games." A pause, then a low chuckle. "Now you're talking. Tomorrow night, Pier 47, midnight. Bring a cashier's check for 2.3. You show we talk. You don't, well, accidents happen." The line went dead. Harrison, listening through the feed, scribbled furiously. "Perfect," he said. "They just gave us location, intent, and extortion terms. We've got them." Relief mixed with dread. Tomorrow night, everything would come to a head. Maria placed her hand gently on mine, steadying me. "You're not alone in this," she whispered. And for the first time, I believed it. The following night felt heavier than any in my life. Pier 47 loomed in the distance as the city's hum quieted, replaced by the slap of waves against rotting wood. Harrison's team had set up in unmarked vans nearby, their radios whispering like restless ghosts. My role was simple: walk onto that pier with a briefcase filled with decoy papers, stall the sharks long enough for the trap to spring. But nothing felt simple when I pictured Maria's face or Margaret's photo in my wallet. Standing there, wine biting through my coat, I thought of how far betrayal had driven me, from a father hoping for reconciliation to a man about to face criminals who would gladly bleed him dry. At exactly midnight, headlights cut through the fog. A black SUV rolled up, tires crunching gravel. 3 men stepped out, dressed in leather and shadows. The leader, a tall figure with a scar slicing across his cheek, approached with a grin that didn't touch his eyes. "Miller," he drawled. "Glad you're smarter than your son." He nodded at the briefcase in my hand. "That the money?" My heart pounded, but I forced a calm voice. "Cashier's check. You'll have your debt, but you leave me and anyone tied to me out of it." He chuckled, the sound like gravel under boots. "Funny thing about debt, it spreads." like rot. Your boy thought he could outplay us. Now it's your turn. One of the others stepped closer, peering at me with a predator's curiosity. You look nervous, old man? Maybe you're thinking of calling the cops. My grip tightened on the case. If I wanted them here, they'd already be. That line bought me precious seconds. Behind them, I spotted the faint flicker of movement, Harrison's men creeping closer, shadows blending with shadows. The scarred man gestured. Open it. Let's see. My hands moved slowly, deliberately. I flipped the latches, revealing the decoy documents Ellis had prepared, mock checks, meaningless contracts. The man's grin faded as he realized what he was looking at. You think this is a joke? His hand twitched toward his jacket, and I caught the gleam of steel. My blood ran cold. Before I could speak, sirens wailed, cutting through the night. Floodlights snapped on, turning the pier into a stage of revelation. Police hands where we can see them. Harrison's voice boomed across the chaos. The sharks turned, snarling, but there was nowhere to run. Armed officers poured from every angle, guns raised, commands, sharp and unyielding. The scarred leader spat at the ground, glaring at me with venom. This isn't over, Miller. His wrists were yanked behind his back, cuffs clinking shut. The others were shoved to the ground, curses spilling into the night air. I stood frozen, my heart racing, until Harrison appeared at my side, his hand firm on my shoulder. You did good, he said. You just saved yourself, and maybe a dozen others who might have been next. I exhaled shakily, the weight of weeks finally breaking free. As they hauled the criminals away, I looked out over the dark water, whispering to the memory of Margaret. It's over. At last. But even as the words left my lips, I knew the scars of betrayal never fade completely. The pier was quiet after the last patrol cars pulled away, the night reclaiming its silence. I stood there for a long time, watching the water shift under the moonlight, my body finally trembling from the release of everything I'd held in. The fight was over, at least on this front. The sharks were in custody, Rick and Emma sat awaiting trial, and the law had drawn its line. But victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. Back home, Maria sat at my kitchen table waiting. She had refused to leave until she knew I was safe. When I walked in, her eyes searched mine, and only when she saw me nod did her shoulders finally ease. It's done, I said softly, hanging up my coat. They're finished. She poured us both tea, her hands steadier than mine. Then you can breathe again, she replied, her voice calm, grounding. But as I lifted the cup to my lips, my gaze landed on the drawer where I had tucked away Rick's old photos. Birthdays, graduations, family vacations, memories that now felt like lies. I don't know if I can ever breathe again, I admitted. He was my boy. I raised him to know right from wrong, and still he chose this path. Maria placed her hand gently over mine. Sometimes blood betrays us. But loyalty, real loyalty, comes from choice. Her words struck deep, carving truth into a wound that still bled. The following Monday, she arrived at the restaurant for her first official day as manager. I watched from the corner as she greeted each employee with dignity, listened to their concerns, and organized the floor with precision. Within hours, the staff looked at her differently. Not as a former housekeeper, but as a leader. Seeing her step into that role filled me with something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. Out of the ashes of betrayal, something honest had grown. That night, I walked into my living room, Margaret's photo on the mantel catching the soft lamplight. I spoke aloud as if she were still there. We lost our son, but we didn't lose everything. You'd be proud of Maria. You'd see her courage. My voice cracked, but for the first time, the grief didn't break me. It steadied me. Later, Detective Harrison called with an update. The loan sharks were facing multiple charges: extortion threats, conspiracy. Combined with Rick and Emma's crimes, the case was airtight. "You'll need to testify, Mr. Miller," he said. "But you've done the hard part. You lived." His words lingered after the call ended. I had lived. I had walked into a trap meant to erase me, and I had walked out stronger, carrying not just Margaret's memory, but the weight of hard lessons carved into my soul. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I realized something profound. Betrayal had taken my son from me, but it hadn't taken my dignity, my will, or my ability to trust again. Maria's loyalty had proved that family isn't just blood. It's who stands with you when the fire comes. And in that truth, I finally found peace. Looking back now, I see betrayal for what it truly is. Not just the breaking of trust, but the shattering of a bond you thought unbreakable. My son didn't simply make mistakes. He made choices. Choices that nearly cost me my life, choices that revealed greed can live even in the heart of family. That truth was more painful than any poison they could have slipped into my glass. But in the darkest of nights, light can come from the most unexpected places. Maria proved that to me. She wasn't bound to me by blood, but by courage. When it mattered most, she acted not because she had to, but because it was right. From her, I learned that family isn't always about who shares your name. It's about who chooses to stand beside you when standing comes with a cost. To those listening now, I ask you to think, have you seen glimpses of betrayal in your own family? Have you ever been forced to question who you can trust? And when you faced that moment, how did you respond? Share your story, because your voice might help someone else find clarity in their own storm. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share. And remember, this integrity cannot be stolen, and loyalty cannot be faked. Hold on to those who prove themselves worthy and never let betrayal define you. Thank you for listening.